या देवी सर्वभूतेषु दयारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वर गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। जय गणेश गणनाथ दया निधि सकल विघ्न कर दूर हमारे। जय गणेश गणनाथ दया निधि सकल विघ्न कर दूर हमारे। जय गणेश गणनाथ। प्रथम धरे जो ध्यान तुम्हारे किसके पूर्ण तार जसारे। प्रथम धरे जो ध्यान तुम्हारे किसके पूर्ण तार जसारे। लंबोदर गज वदन मनोहर लंबोदर गज वदन मनोहर कर त्रिशूल परशुवर धारी। जय गणेश गणनाथ दया कर दूर हमारे। जय गणेश गणनाथ। रिद्धि सिद्धि दो चमर दुलारे मूषक वाहन परम सुभावे। रिद्धि सिद्धि दो चमर दुलारे मूषक वाहन ब्रह्मादिक सुर ध्यावत मन में। ब्रह्मादिक सुर ध्यावत मन में ऋषि मुनि गण सब दास तुम्हारे। जय गणेश गणनाथ दया निधि सकल विघ्न कर दूर हमारे। जय गणेश गणनाथ दया निधि सकल विघ्न कर दूर हमारे। जय गणेश गणनाथ। दर्शन दो घनश्याम नाथ मोरे अभिया प्यासी। दर्शन दो घनश्याम नाथ मोरे अभिया प्यासी। दर्शन दो घनश्याम। मन मंदिर की ज्योति जगा दो। मन मंदिर की ज्योति जगा दो। घट घट बासी दर्शन दो घनश्याम नाथ मोरे अभिया प्यासी। दर्शन दो घनश्याम। a joy to see all of you and to be with all of you. So those of you who were with us last month, you will remember that in this series of talks, I am taking up 7 questions from the final chapter of the Ramayana, in this case, the RamCharitmasan of Goswami Tulsidas. And this is a conversation between Garuda, who is a student, and the Bhushandi, who is the teacher. So these are 7 questions and there are 7 answers that we are discussing. But what I want to say at the very beginning of our discussion today is that these are not just questions and answers. We would be missing the more fundamental point of this discussion if this is all we thought. If we hear the questions and we hear the answers and we say, okay, I know the answer to this question. And this is a larger point, I think, about the nature of the Hindu religious tradition, or I would say the nature of every religious tradition. So there is jnana. So the jnana or the wisdom is contained in the question and in the answer. But after that, there is a further question that we must ask ourselves. How do I translate this answer into action? What does this answer mean for me? Not that I know the answer, but how is this answer transformative? What is the transformation that this particular answer is asking of me? What does this teaching require of me? Especially, what are the ethical implications of this teaching? What is the ethical obligation that this particular teaching is asking of me? And if we consider the larger purpose of religious teaching in our tradition, and as I would say, generally in all traditions, which is to move human beings, to transform human beings, to awaken human beings from a state of self-centeredness into a condition of what we can call, or what some teachers have called, other-centeredness. Movement from self-centeredness to self-centeredness on other beings. Then we can ask specifically, how does this teaching move me in this direction? How does it transform me into a compassionate being, a more compassionate being, a being who engages in compassionate action in this world? So this is the question that we must ask ourselves. So Garuda is asking a question of Bhushandi is answering, but then we have to ask and answer a question for ourselves. How is this teaching transformative for us? So last month we looked at the first question. Basically he asked, what is special about being a human being? Why do we regard our humanity as a gift, as a blessing? And I focus in a particular way on the last part of that answer, Jnana, Vairagya, Bhagati. That it's an opportunity for the cultivation of wisdom, Jnana, but wisdom that is also free from greed, wisdom that is informed by Vairagya, wisdom that allows us, again, transforms us into caring for others, and finally, of course, through love, the cultivation of of love. So today I want to focus on the second question. So these are very short questions, and Garuda asks in this question, Bara Dukha Kavana. What is the greatest human suffering? Dukkha, Bara Dukha. Not simply what is human suffering, but what is the greatest source of human suffering? And as I indicated, the answer is an unusual one, perhaps even surprising, but it should not be. And he answers, Nahi daridra sama dukha jagamahi. Nahi daridra sama. There is no suffering like poverty. Nahi daridra sama. So it means like, similar to. In this entire world, Jagamahi, in the entire universe, he says, there is no suffering like poverty. That's what I said, it surprises me in some senses, because given the first question, you might expect he will say, well, the greatest suffering is a person who has no jnana, or a person who is, has no vairagya, or is not free from greed, or which are not. But he says, Nahi daridra dukha sama jagamahi, there is no greater suffering in the world than poverty. Daridra, that's the word that we translate here as poverty. Daridra to is a condition of being in poverty. So we can speak, and I will at least speak of the meaning of this word in two ways this morning. But at least we can begin with this most primary meaning, which I think is very relevant here, as I hope to show. So that at the most fundamental primary level of meaning, this word daridra, it indicates a state or a condition in which a human being or human beings lack what we regard as the necessities for good and decent living, dignified living, which would be nutrition, food, shelter, clean water, health care, access to health care, education, access to education, and so on. And keep in mind that we are speaking here of involuntary poverty. In our Hindu tradition and in other traditions, there is the voluntary poverty of the monk, or the monastic poverty. But in this case here, we are talking about involuntary poverty. People who experience poverty as a condition that they don't choose. In other words, it's a condition that they wish they could be free from. So involuntary poverty. And we have many definitions that help us understand this. The United Nations, for example, defines extreme poverty as, and I'm quoting here, a condition characterized by severe deprivation of human needs, including food, safe drinking water, sanitation, health, shelter, education, and the UN includes information, access to information. It depends not only on income, but also access to services. So here in the Ramayana, we have this important link that the teacher is making here for us between daridra and dukkha. This is the connection between poverty and suffering. Poverty as a form of suffering, and in fact he identifies it as the greatest source of human suffering. Because I think it is a suffering that is both physical as well as psychological or emotional. It has, all of these dimensions. A person who is in poverty, of course, without access to the basic necessities for dignified living. There is physical suffering, but poverty also causes humiliation. Poverty also causes, in many, a sense of shame, a condition of powerlessness, vulnerability to exploitation, and we can add to the list. So the suffering here, the dukkha, has multiple dimensions. And although, when one looks at the global scene, clearly, there is an overall reduction in global poverty in the last few decades. But the most recent statistics indicate that at least 783 million people live below what is defined as the international poverty line, which is under US $1.90 per day. Under $1.90 per day, 783 million people in our world live, and half of these are children. So it's a global problem. And you may be aware of one of the big agreements in our world is nations coming together to develop what we call the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which we are supposed to attain in 2030 if the world is on track. But the first of the Sustainable Development Goals is to end poverty in all of its forms everywhere. To end poverty in all of its forms everywhere. A goal that the nations have set themselves for the year 2030. We hope. So, why is this an important question and an important answer for us? Later on in the Uttarakhand, we have a vision. The text gives us a vision of what a good community should look like. What we should aspire to as a human community. What would be a flourishing human community where all beings have an opportunity for the good life, the opportunity for the good life for all beings. And this would be a community, in the words of the Ramayana, Alpa Mrityu Nahi Kavani Pira. Where people, it's an interesting expression, Alpa Mrityu, where people do not die prematurely. There are no premature deaths. Think of it. Premature deaths occur when people perhaps don't have access to healthcare, to clean water, to sanitation. There's no premature death. Alpa Mrityu Nahi. Saba Sundara, Saba Viraja Sharira. All are healthy. Bodies are beautiful. Nahi Daridra. There is no poverty. Nahi Daridra. There is no poverty. Kovu Dukhi Nadina. And people don't suffer because of lack of necessities. Dina is the condition of want. Nahi Kovu Buddha. They are none without access to knowledge. So, but we're talking in the United States a lot about educational accessibility. Here, the text is, and there's no one who is not educated. Nahi Kovu Buddha. Buddha na lakshana hina. No one is without virtue. People are virtuous. So, you might think, because it's the Ramayana, that somehow, one way you might think of this, that somehow this is a condition miraculously brought about by divine intervention. On the other hand, you can think of it as a community that is brought forth by people who have the right values. The people who transform this community on the basis of commitment and policies to the right values. Inspired by divine, but who did the work of building such a community. Because, you know, the Hindu tradition in this answer and in so many other ways, yes, and this is something we should not forget. Because sometimes when we speak of our tradition, we emphasize rightly that it is a tradition of great spirituality, of great wisdom, but it is not an impractical tradition. It is not a tradition that is unconcerned about human life in this world. It is not a tradition that talks about liberation in a way that is completely disconnected from the conditions of human beings in this world. And that's a balance we always have to keep. So this is why, you know, in the four goals of human existence, which we speak of as the Purusharthas, the four goals of every human life, Artha, you know, material well-being, which is the overcoming of poverty, is one of the goals. And we should always think of these goals not only individually, but in terms of the communal well-being as well. So by including Artha as one of the four goals, I think the tradition is emphasizing that its spirituality is not, as I would say, is not anti-materialistic. It doesn't exclude well-being, the well-being of the body on this earth in here. So what do we have here? We have a statement here in this text, and as I said, largely in the Hindu tradition, that there is no suffering like poverty. Nahi daridra samadukha jagamaya. We have that as number one. Secondly, as I said, we have a tradition that identifies material well-being or artha as one of the four goals of human life. Which is to say that a human being who involuntarily, we're speaking about, who doesn't have access, I'm not talking yet about reason, but who lacks basic necessities for life, is missing one of the fundamental goals of human existence. Thirdly, we have a vision of an ideal human community here, in which there is no poverty, nahi daridra. And we have a prayer that many of us recite daily. Sarve bhavantu sukhina. May all be happy. Sarve santu niramaya. May all be free from oppression. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. May all experience goodness. Ma kaschit dukha bhav bhavet. May no one suffer. So we have, you know, these four important elements. So what, you know, then I come to the question that I asked at the beginning. In the light of all of this, as human beings, what are our obligations? What are our obligations? So if we are a tradition, as we are, that in which at the heart of our prayer is Ma kaschit dukha bhav bhavet, may no one suffer. And here you have a clear teaching that poverty is a form of suffering, and the greatest form of suffering. What can we do? What are our obligations? We cannot speak of suffering, we cannot, you know, spiritualize our understanding of suffering so much that we ignore the realities of physical suffering. We cannot ignore dukkha, as we are seeing, when human beings lack opportunities to attain the basic necessities of life. For us, therefore, I am saying this morning, this is a religious question also. It is not only a political question. how to respond to poverty is not only a question for the politicians, it's a question for us coming from religious places of meaning. Because we are concerned about suffering in all of its forms. And here, poverty, child poverty, adult poverty, and their linked is identified as dukkha, as suffering. So what are our responsibilities? You would appreciate that in a lecture like this that I am giving, I'm not a policy expert. And this is not a lecture on policy. So I'm not this morning going to say, how we can solve this problem. But my point this morning, I am teaching from a place of religious meaning to make one big point, which is that we cannot be indifferent. We cannot be indifferent to suffering caused by poverty. I would even put it to say that it's part of our dharma to address suffering. It's a religious, for me it's a religious obligation. It's a religious obligation. But I can only broadly say that when I think of this problem and its solutions, there are at least two dimensions. One is that I can't be indifferent, and I can't also be without hope. I can't be cynical about it. Because I come from a tradition, at the heart of which is this teaching, karmanevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So if I start as an individual by thinking I can never do something about it, that my efforts will make no difference because this is such a huge global problem, I think that I am violating a central teaching of my tradition, that I should not be worried about the end. Karmanevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't worry about whether you will be successful or not. You have a right and an obligation to do something, to act. Karmaneva adhikarahate. Your right, your obligation is to act, not to worry about whether the action will be successful or not. That's one way of reading this beautiful Bhagavad Gita text. Karmaneva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Because hopelessness or cynicism is also a violation of this teaching. If it paralyzes and renders us unable to act. Because very often we encounter people who say, this problem is too great. We can't do anything about it. That's indifference. That's cynicism. That's helplessness. That goes against the grain of Sri Krishna's teaching in the Bhagavad Gita. So whatever, we can talk about the larger kinds of solutions, whether these are solutions for the nation state or solutions at the corporate level. But all of these ultimately depend on individual human beings who are virtuous, who are driven by compassion, by daya, by karuna, by concern for dukkha. That's where all transformation can start. So there are ways that we can think of this at a personal level and ask, what can I do, however small it might be. But certainly there are the larger questions that we also cannot be indifferent about. And many of us, are connected with or involved in corporations and businesses. And wherever possible, we can bring our moral voices, and we can say, that the purpose of the corporation is that it certainly includes profit maximization, but not only. Not only. We can try to transform our corporations so they have a deeper consciousness of the social good, of the common good, and their obligations. We can talk to them about social obligations, and these are discussions that are going on in some places. We can also be supportive of political policies that that are concerned, identify poverty eradication as a serious challenge, that prioritize development and poverty reduction as better guarantees of peace in our world. So I do want to say, I've always been struck by he said so many profound things, but one of the more profound messages from Gandhiji, whose 150th birth anniversary we celebrated recently, because he was always asked in his life, as a religious person, why are you involved in politics? Why do you worry so much about politics? And he says, it is quite true that my ultimate purpose in life is to know God. Put it in his own way, to see the universal, all-pervading Spirit of truth face to face. My purpose in life is to know the divine. But I know, he says, that I will not know God unless I am able to love every human being. Interesting steps in his argument. My purpose in life is spiritual, is to know God. But I will not know God unless I learn to love every being in this creation. And I cannot love someone without caring about their suffering. I cannot love you and be indifferent to the fact that you are in suffering. And he says, so this is why, he says, my devotion to truth has drawn me into the field of politics. And I can say, he adds, without slightest hesitation, and yet in all humility, that those who say religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion means. And he's not talking about narrow partisan politics. He's talking about concern at the highest levels for policies and practices that overcome suffering. Concern where decisions are being made and resources allocated to inform and to ensure that those policies express this commitment to the overcoming of human suffering. Because basically, there are two things that all religious people should be concerned about. One is to promote human flourishing, and secondly, to overcome human suffering. And those two things are related. And we have to care about them in whatever field of work we are involved in. How our work promotes the flourishing of human beings, and how does it overcome dukkha? How does it overcome suffering? There is another way in which we can interpret this word daridra. This is the first, and perhaps for me, the more important way of speaking about it. But I do want to also mention at least another way of which the traditions understood this word daridra. So I'll start with a story that Swami Vivekananda told. So he said there was an Indian emperor who went on a hunting expedition, and he came across a saintly person, a sage, in the forest while he was hunting. And he was so pleased with this saint, he wanted to get the blessing of the saint and to give him some gifts. So he invited the saint to come back with him to his palace, to his capital, so he could be hospitable to him, he could receive his blessings, he could give him some presents. And at first, the saintly man was reluctant to go with him. He says, I don't really need very much. Here in the forest, I have enough food, You can see I have a place to live, I have clothing to wear, I have a clean source of water, I have all of the basic things that I need. So I'm not sure why I should come with you to your capital. But the emperor insisted, and at last the sage agreed to go with him to his capital so that he could give him some presents, he could receive some presents from the emperor. So when they arrived at the emperor's palace, it was the time for, it was evening, time for the emperor's prayer. So the emperor took him to his prayer room and he says, you know, please sit here, I'll just go and I'll say my prayer and then I will come back. So the saintly man sat outside of his prayer room and the emperor went to pray. And he heard the emperor's prayer and he prayed for wealth. He prayed that his territory will grow, he'll have more territory, bring more land into his kingdom. He prayed for Shakti, for power. He prayed for Yasha, for fame. So he prayed for wealth, he prayed for territory, he prayed for land, he prayed for fame, and then the prayer was over. And as he walked out of the prayer room, this sage stood up to leave. And he says, so the emperor says, you know, no, please come, you know, I'm sorry I kept you waiting, I was just praying, but don't leave. Please come, I have some presents that I want to give to you. You have not yet received my presents. And then the sage said, I do not accept presents from beggars. Your needs are much greater than mine. You are the poor person, you are the Daridra, you are the poor man. I will not accept anything from you after I have heard your prayer. So first, you know, you please take care of your wants. And then see if you have anything to give to me. So I think you get the point of Vivekananda's story. He reminds us of another way of thinking of this word, that it is a state of greed also. Dissatisfaction, persisting dissatisfaction, the sense that I never have enough. There was perhaps you read about it also, last year in the research came about the relationship between wealth and poverty and well-being or happiness. But just to summarize it quickly, the conclusion is as follows. Wealth is necessary for human well-being. And anyone who says otherwise is living in a false world. Wealth is necessary for attaining well-being in life. And the amount varies, depending on your geographical context. So, if you come from the Caribbean, the study says, you know, that you will need about $35,000 US for well-being, to be a person in a condition of well-being, happy. In New Zealand, it was 125,000 US. Here in the United States, as I recollect, it varied from 75 to 90,000 annually. But this was the insight of this study, which was an empirical study, very widely done. The insight of it is that once enough money is gained to cover basic needs adequately, more wealth did not contribute to people's sense of well-being. More wealth did not contribute to the sense of well-being after they had met a certain threshold necessary to meet their needs, you know, for health care, nutrition, shelter, etc. In fact, the study added an interesting conclusion to that. One sense of well-being may even decline. Because wealth then started to serve psychological purposes. Then you started to measure your self-worth, your self-value on the basis of what you had in comparison with other human beings. So every time you thought someone had more than you, your sense of self diminished, and therefore you were subject to greater anxiety, greater worry, greater fear, because you were not measuring yourself. You know, initially you pursued wealth for the right reason, to meet your basic needs and the needs of your family adequately and decently. Beyond that then, you started to pursue wealth to satisfy your ego needs. And ego needs have no satisfaction. There is no end. There is no satiation, but there is anxiety. There is fear. There is worry. So this is an insight that has been present in our tradition from ancient times. I would say it's been present in all of the religious traditions. I can give you so many examples of it if you read the Katha Upanishad. You know, it's the encounter between Yama and Nachiketas. It's a very interesting discussion there about wealth. And it's a very beautiful encounter. Sometime we can discuss. But there is an important statement there in that text. Nahi vittena tarpaniyo manushyaha. Na vittena tarpaniyo manushyaha. Very important insight that corresponds to the study that I just told you. That the human being, manushyaha, na vittena, by wealth alone, a human being will never find contentment, will never be satisfied. You know, again, looking at another tradition, very similar to what Jesus taught. Human beings shall not live by bread alone. Something more is required for human well-being, for human flourishing. So this is the big insight. In fact, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, if you're familiar with this text, there was this man, Yayati. Yayati was a king. And he was given 100 years. Again, summarizing the story, it has a lot of twists and turns. But he was given 100 years to see how he would feel after he enjoyed himself with wealth and all kinds of pleasure. So for 100 years, he got a very youthful body. And he accumulated wealth and he experienced pleasure. And at the end of it, he gave an account. What happened? How do you feel now? And in the Bhagavata, he says, Na jatu kamaha kamanam upabhogena shamyati. So one will not overcome desire. One will not attain a place of contentment by fulfilling desire after desire. And he gives the example. Havisha Krishna Vartma Eva Bhuyaha. It is like pouring ghee into a fire. The ghee becomes a fuel. The fire is not extinguished. So, if you think that at some point in time, by multiplying desires, you come to an end of desires, he says, no, I have not found, after 100 years, after 100 years of enjoyment, I am in the same place that I started, in this condition of want. He was still Daridra in this condition of poverty. We ignore this to our own detriment. It's a great insight of our tradition. Na vittena nachiketas, na vittena tarpaniyo manushyaha. Human being will not be satisfied by wealth alone. there's a more fundamental need that we have. Bhagavad Gita, Atmanyeva Atmana Tushtati. We need this spiritual wisdom to satisfy that kind of daridra, So, this second meaning of daridra that I am speaking about is really what, in the Buddhist tradition, they are the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, which was in the first sermon that he gave at the park in Varanasi. So there he says, when he was asked, what is the human problem? He diagnosed it as dukkha. Dukkha. And then the second noble truth is, what is the cause of this problem? And then he says it's greed, Trishna. So he was dealing, not that he ignored the first meaning of daridra that I spoke about, but I just gave he was concerned with the second meaning of daridra. Daridra is this condition of dissatisfaction in spite of what. So someone can be poor in this sense, in spite of being affluent. And this is what the Buddha was concerned about. The dissatisfaction that he called Trishna, this condition of lack, the condition of inadequacy that may be there in spite of affluence, in spite of wealth. And then the third he says, so there was the diagnosis, there is the cause, medically this is the etiology, there's a diagnosis, there's the etiology, and thirdly, you want to know, what is the solution? What is the prognosis? What is the prognosis? So he says, yes, there is a solution, and that's nirvana. And then, of course, the fourth is the therapy. What is the way? What are the instructions you have for me to get there? So he calls it the marga, or the way, which is the Four Noble Truths. So dukkha, Trishna, nirvana, marga, in the Buddhist tradition to address this daridra. So I will stop here with these thoughts for you this morning, but I want to leave you with we should not miss the central point of this answer, Nahi daridra samadukha jagamahi, that there is no greater suffering than poverty. And by identifying poverty as the greatest source of suffering in our world, the text is reminding us that if we care about suffering, we cannot be indifferent to poverty in our community, to poverty in our world. We have social responsibilities. We have to exercise discernment. We have to support those policies that aim, in our judgment, to be more successful policies for the eradication of poverty. And as I said, in that broader sense, we cannot be politically indifferent as well. As I cited Gandhiji's reasons for his activism. And I leave you with one quote also from Uttarkand of Ramayana, where the teacher there summarized what it means to be a person who is transformed by wisdom. And he says, this is a person, para dukkha dukkha, sukha sukha. Para dukkha dukkha, sukha sukha. That one who experiences sorrow in his or her heart when another person suffers. Para dukkha dukkha, para sukha sukha. And one who rejoices in the flourishing of another. And we should think of this in the broadest level, our community, our nation, our world. that is Hindus, let us be known as people who are paradukha dukha, who are concerned about suffering, that we suffer when others suffer, and we rejoice in the prosperity and the flourishing of other human beings. This should be our mark. This is the transformation that we should aim for. Our spirituality should not be a spirituality that is disconnected from the condition of human beings in this world. This world is important. Life in this world is important. I think this is why the teacher surprises us with this answer when he's asked, what is the greatest suffering? And he says, there is no suffering as great as poverty. And we are reminded of our obligations. So we will conclude here with prayer. Thank you very much. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva, tvameva bandhu cha sakha tvameva, tvameva vidya dravinam tvameva, tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Achyutam keshavam ramanarayanam krishna damodaram vasudevam harim sridharam madhavam gopika vallabham janaki nayakam ramchandram bhaje. Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.